Welcome to the KuppingerCole Analyst Chat. I'm your host. My name is Matthias Reinwarth. I'm the Director of the Practice Identity and Access Management here at KuppingerCole Analysts. This is the final episode for 2022. And for this episode, my guest is Martin Kuppinger. He's the Principal Analyst and one of the founders of KuppingerCole Analysts. Hi, Martin. Good to see you.
Welcome, Matthias. Pleasure to talk to you again.
Great to have you. And we want to take a look back at 2022, and looking back always means also looking into the future, what will be relevant next year. So if you look back at 2022 as an analyst at the topics that we cover at Identity and Access Management, at Cybersecurity, what was most striking and what might have the most influence also on next year?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question, because there are a couple of aspects, some more on a strategic and generic level, some more on a sort of a specific technology level. But when I look at some of the major things that we have observed, that we see happening, aside of all that work organizations still have to do in the foundational aspects of IAM and cybersecurity, in modernizing what they did over the past 1 or 2 decades, I think there's still zero trust as one of the most relevant topics. I think the important thing nowadays is not just what is zero trust and why do we need it, but to really put it into practice. And this is the task where it really becomes challenging, because it means we need to go from a high-level paradigm to concrete architectures and understand which capabilities of different types of technologies, such as certain IAM capabilities, certain cybersecurity capabilities, contribute to which extent to a zero trust, really technical architecture. Which tools does it finally require? How does this map to what organizations have in place? What do they need to do first, etc.? So this is, I think, the interesting step, which is starting now. So we see organizations working on that, but it's also obvious that there's a quite some way to go from the concept and saying, okay, we do a zero trust strategy, to a concrete implementation, to something which then really could be named as at least almost done zero trust IT security architecture in place.
Yeah, our colleague Alexei mentioned in one of the earlier episodes this year that zero trust is a bit like feng shui in an existing IT cybersecurity architecture. The components are already there. They just need to be put in the right manner so that they work properly together, and then really are the full picture of zero trust. And I like that image, although it's
I think it's a bit oversimplification, because yes, a lot of components are there, but usually not all of them. So because it requires some of the more modern things. So zero trust network access, if you need it instead of traditional VPNs. It requires fraud reduction intelligence and adaptive authentication instead of traditional authentication and MFA. It requires a lot of work around policy-based access, which, by the way, is another topic I see as very high and hot on the list.
Absolutely. So moving away from the traditional role-based access control towards more context-specific, more real-time access management decisions, access decisions. This is really something that is embedded in the concept of zero trust, but this is something that has also a broader picture. It is more and more important also in traditional IAM strategies and also in application strategies. We've been talking recently about passwordless. Is this also something that comes into play there and for the future and for the last year?
So I see we saw a huge uptake of passwordless in different variants, from what some interesting call a true and phishing-resistant passwordless authentication to passwordless as something which is also supported, and surely there's a blurring line between what is, so to speak, really passwordless and whatnot. At the end, I think user experience and security count here, so convenience and security, but we see this momentum behind passwordless authentication, and I think the thing which is increasingly the learning is that there are two elements in that. So the one is what you do, so to speak, for the broad mass of many of use cases you have, like built-in support for passwordless authentication. What do you do for the extended use case, or to ensure that a user, regardless of which system in the backend is used, always can use the same type of authentication? So we see an evolution here, and I think the good message is that the relevance of passwords is going down, specifically in enterprise environments. Unfortunately, it takes a bit longer, but even there we see some uptake in consumer-centric use cases. So I get more and more situations where apps say, okay, do you want to integrate this with Touch ID or Face ID or whatever else to get passwordless? So we see an evolution here. We are on track, and even while we will have passwords for probably many, many years, I think the relevance of passwords is really finally going down, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. And this is also the transition line between our two topics. We talked about IAM mainly until now. If we look at the cybersecurity aspect of things, are there other aspects that you consider to be relevant for 2022 and maybe also overlapping into the next year? So
cybersecurity, I think I already touched zero trust, which is surely one of these really important areas with a lot of elements in that. What we see is also this evolution of all these DR technologies, EPDR, EDR, XDR, NDR, MDR, whatever, and also a convergence here into something where we have technology and services combined. And this is, from my perspective, a very essential thing for the majority of organizations. So most businesses, most organizations can't do all the security themselves. They need partners for their SOC, their SIEM, their SOAR, for operating this. And the conversion of both technology and the uptake of more and more managed service offerings is important because it serves these needs of having sort of tech-enabled managed services in place.
And I think that also goes beyond what you just described. This is an important aspect that you just mentioned, but we see it also in existing infrastructures that have been run on premises by own teams within larger organizations. And those organizations are really looking at this existing infrastructure and at this existing operating model and think of modernizing that for various reasons, including the skills gap. The people are just not available. So why not hand that over in a proper manner over to a managed service provider? And I think this is a trend that will continue in 2023 as well, right?
Yeah, but the key term is proper manner here. So you can do a lot of things really badly wrong here, because you still need internal teams that work with the provider. You need to have an exit strategy or a transformation strategy to other service providers. You need to have some level of skills, and you need to have control about what a service provider does, to understand is this really the right way to do it? Do we really cover, or does the service provider cover what we need? And so what I see far too frequent is a lack of thorough understanding of what needs to be done internally. Also, how does this integrate with process? So if you have a SOC as a service, you still need a business impact analysis done internally. You still need an incident response management process that goes from that service provider to your internal teams up to your board, depending on which level of crisis you're experiencing, etc. And I think this is something which tends to be a bit underestimated by saying, okay, we do it as a service and we are done. But there's always a split of responsibility, tenant and provider responsibilities. We're talking about this for decades, more or less, and it remains very essential to have this well-defined, well-thought-out split of responsibilities. And usually in a good target operating model, it's not only tenant and provider, because there might be a cloud provider, and so the technology used by a managed service provider that works with the internal tech team, that tech team works with other internal teams like business teams. So you have the 4 or 5 or 6 levels you need to look at with different accountabilities and different responsibilities. And this is what you need to define.
I fully agree. And as you've mentioned, it's the division of processes, of responsibilities, of the way people and organizations communicate with each other along the supply chain, which it is in that aspect. But on the other hand, something that has proven really successful, and this is something that we as KuppingerCole analysts can be a bit proud of, is that we also have a tooling for dissecting architectures based on standardized methodologies and standardized models and paradigms. And these are the fabrics architectures that we introduced earlier, so a few years ago, but they really gained traction over this year, and we used them in various contexts. And they are also accepted and renowned within vendors and other organizations, consulting companies that understand that these are really valuable tools. So the identity fabric, the cybersecurity fabric, and I think we will work on that in the future as well, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm proud of seeing for instance, our identity fabrics paradigm being so widely accepted also by other analyst companies, and incorporated in many organizations, used by vendors, because it shows that this is something which is really helpful. And I think, and this goes back a bit to zero trust and to other aspects. We need some sort of a holistic perspective, a bigger picture, and something which is still flexible. So not saying this is the one big monolithic tool, but this is the framework in which we can decide and understand what we need and how we build our IAM, our overall cybersecurity, our zero trust infrastructure. And I think this is where these models have proven to be very helpful, also together with the reference architectures. And so, yes, it's important to have these concepts and go away from, I have a problem, I buy a tool, to I have my framework in which I then subsequently improve what I'm doing in identity and in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. If I think back 1 year to December 2021, I would not have dared to make any thoughts about the following year. Do we dare to make any expectations to tell us anybody what we think will happen in 2023 in cybersecurity and IAM, or are we reluctant to do so?
So I think there are a couple of things where I expect some progress. So there are some open themes we just start to talk about, like we need to get better in ownership, like not only ownership of technical accounts from IGA to PAM, but also for integrating identity management and data ownership, integrating identity management code ownership to have really consistent transfers and well-working mover and lever processes that care for transfer of ownership. So this is more on the sort of the foundational side of things. We already touched policy-based access and just in time, and we see a huge uptake here already happening in the space of developing digital services, where we see more and more use of technologies or standards such as OPA, the policy agent, but also we hopefully see more in the sort of the standard applications and legacy IT. And I always say it's a new topic because IBM released RAC-F back in 1976, so 46 years ago. And so that concept is not new. We need to make it work, and we need to use it way more broadly. And policies are a key element in zero trust, so we anyway need to get better here. So I think this will be something where we see quite some evolution in the next year. We will see further evolution around all the authentication stuff, with some of the MFA methods being a bit under pressure from a security perspective. We surely see then also more integration into whatever fraud intelligence generally speaking, a bit more of AI-powered solutions, and also the uptake in using managed services will continue, including also using more as a service deployments. As I said, it still means you need to understand what you're doing. You have your own responsibilities, but we will see an evolution, and surely we will see more happening in practical use of decentralized identity. And one of the hot topics also is how can you optimize onboarding processes for identities, for different types of identities, be it workforce in a work from anywhere world, be it your customers and consumers. There's still a lot of room for evolution in 2023, and cybersecurity and identity will remain so important that organizations will need to continue and also benefit from their investments in these areas.
Absolutely. And that was really an extensive list of areas to watch. So for our audience, if you just rewind a bit and take notes, I think these are really important aspects to have a look at. And when it comes to predictions, I'm a bit reluctant, but one prediction I dare to do from KuppingerCole Analysts, there will be a new set of services, new digital services being made available early next year, early 2023. So you please watch the space at KuppingerCole.com for new interactive digital user experiences focusing on decision makers and vendors, and that will be released early February, I assume. So sometime early next year. So this is really something to look forward to. I don't give away any names. I'm not allowed to. But there will be more to see, and we will talk about it extensively early next year.
Yeah. And this will be powered, so to speak, by all the knowledge, all the experience we have accumulated over 2 decades now. And it will seamlessly integrate with sort of the human services. So if you need stuff, input talks beyond the digital services, there will be always a continuous flow to engage with us directly.
Right. So no fears. We as analysts won't be replaced by ChatGPT. We will be there, but there will be more technology to support us, to augment us, to give better user experiences. Thank you very much, Martin, for sharing your insights, for having a look back at 2022 and the outlook onto 2023. And we will be back early January with the next episode of this podcast. This is the final one for 2022. But watch this space. We will be back with a new episode very soon. Thanks again, Martin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.